This episode is sponsored by Agent CRM. If you're in sales and tired of paying 3, 4, or 5 different companies for your email, CRM, funnels, phone, follow-up automation, check out Agent CRM. It's an all-in-one tool that combines all that you need to reach out, nurture, and close your clients. They've got weekly support calls so you can get up and running in no time. Get a free 14-day trial by going to the link below in the show notes. Hello, everyone. This is Dan Wynn with the Intentional Entrepreneur Podcast. I have a very special guest with me today. He's the author of a book called A Firm Worth Building, which helps professional businesses scale and thrive. He started his firm with just $20 in savings and has now managed up to $500 million in his RIA business. I do want to welcome to the show Rick Watson.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you too, and certainly I'm very excited about the topic we're going to talk about today, which is building trust faster through the concept of trust compression. But before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts, can you share a little bit about yourself and how you got to what you're doing today?
Yeah. So I was a reluctant entrepreneur. I actually was really happy working under somebody else,
Mhm.
and that situation changed. So I just started building a business, and as I started to build, I started to realize, well, now I need staffing. Well, now I need to leverage my time better. And
Mhm.
what came of it was 5 different companies today. And I
Mhm.
think that's really common in entrepreneurs. I think that really shocked me, is the number of them that own more than one company.
Yeah, and you and I work with a lot of business owners, and it's obviously we've been in the game a little bit, and it's kind of now commonplace. It's not hard to see that it's business owners have multiple, we call it streams of income, and maybe we'll touch on it today and discuss how is that possible without distracting and
Yeah,
not
I think
chasing.
I think that the thing is that it's once you have those lessons, and it's why we
Mhm.
wrote the book, Firm Worth
Mhm.
Building, is that once you have those concepts, it's applicable in so many ways. And
Mhm.
I'm interviewed all the time on, I just was doing one for therapists, right?
Mhm.
Which I think is so interesting. But the therapy business is a business, and it runs
Mhm.
like a business.
Exactly. And you just wrote this book, A Firm Worth Building, helping professionals, obviously scale and grow their business. And as service professionals, right, a lot of it, right, our business, a lot of it rides on our reputation and how we service our clients. And for a lot of us, it's by referral. And I think with referrals, obviously, there's a kind of inherent trust with that. But how do you, kind of squeeze as, you know, imply that trust or impose that trust, so to speak, in the shortest amount of time possible so that service professionals can secure the client and service them the way they should be serviced?
I think, well, I'll start by just saying, to answer that question, so many businesses, they're not intentional about it. So
Mm,
you want to be intentional, right, about
hmm.
that client experience. What is it exactly? Part of that intentional client experience is this concept called trust compression. So
Hmm.
trust compression is the idea of shortening the amount of time before they feel like you're their best friend.
Hmm.
And the way that happens, it's weird the way humans are wired. We're not based on the length of interactions. I think sometimes we're like, well, I'm just going to spend an hour, 2 hours with them and try to build that trust. It doesn't work like that.
Hmm.
What happens is your brain checks in and says, how was the last interaction was that how was the last interaction with that person? And
Hmm.
if it was good, then they kind of check a box and they go on to the next. So breaking appointments into more frequent appointments, short, more frequent appointments,
Hmm.
is much more powerful. If in my business, my side of the business, we'll usually meet. I mean, the way it usually works is they'll meet with somebody, they talk for an hour and a half until the person's just exhausted, and then
Hmm.
they come back a second time, maybe 2, 3 weeks later, and do the same thing.
Hmm.
Well, the client forgets all sorts of stuff between one meeting and the other. But
Hmm.
if and it wasn't necessarily a good experience, they're exhausted. If I
Hmm.
take that same meeting and break it into 4 20-minute meetings. I'm
Mhm.
more efficient with my time. And that person now will have 2 or 3 years worth of experience with me. That's how we've aged that relationship really quickly by
Mhm.
and then we hold those meetings really tight together. So 3 or 4 days
Mhm.
apart.
Mhm.
That idea compresses that relationship. And again, then they're your best friend because they've met with you 4, 5, 6 times in a very short amount of time.
Now, is this rule applicable in every scenario? Are there exceptions? Because I think for some people, like, we could have they might have a thinking where it's, hey, we could have just knocked everything out instead of 4 meetings in just 1 or 2 meetings.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think
Mhm.
that is it a meeting to get something specifically done? Like
Mm.
I need to get the data, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
You're right. You'd be crazy to break that up across multiple meetings. I think if we're trying to build relationship, then more frequent meetings is better.
Mm.
One of the things that we talk about in our firm a lot, it's the number of meals that you can share with a client.
Mm.
The number that is the best measuring stick for
Mhm.
how tight you are. And so we'll do, for example, client trips, and I'll spend 8 lunches and dinners with people. Well,
Mhm.
I'm so much more tight with them at the end of that. So, but again,
Mm.
you're right. If it's There are times when you'll mush meetings together,
Mhm.
but you're intentional even when you do that. You don't just sort of do it. It's
Mhm.
because you're trying to specifically get a lot of accomplished because this plastic surgeon is really hard to get with, and you're only going to get a few minutes of time. So we're going to try to make that really tight. But ideally,
Mhm.
if I can break meetings apart, um, and you'll build trust faster by making more frequent,
Mhm.
more impactful meetings.
Yeah, can you expand on that a little bit also as well? Because you mentioned a little bit, if it's kind of a data collection meeting, then you'll need to spend as much time as you need.
Yeah.
Are we kind of talking about maybe early on in the relationship where we have not secured the client, and then how do you kind of sell it to them, right? Because typically for me, I only need one, maybe two, just as a follow up because I had to do some research. So how do you kind of sell some of 4 meetings, maybe 20 minutes to the client?
So I think what we do is we talk about the importance of the relationship in the very
Hmm.
beginning.
Hmm.
We outline, so in our process, we have a 4-step process for bringing on
Hmm.
a new client. They expect that. And in fact, if you violate those 4, they'll complain. Well, I only got 3 meetings. I was supposed to get 4. So I think that, so a lot of times, a lot of professionals, attorneys would be an example of that, where they oftentimes are, they're all about data, right? I need data.
Hmm.
The problem is you haven't earned the right to ask for that data. So
Hmm.
think of
Hmm.
it, I think there's a lot of similarities between the dating scene, right? You
Hmm.
could sit down with somebody and say, so you're sitting in a bar and you're saying, tell me these things, you're
Hmm.
asking questions that you haven't earned the right to ask yet. Okay.
Hmm.
So it would be better to say hello to them, do whatever you do, and then
Hmm.
walk away. Come
Yeah.
back later.
Yeah.
And I think it's that desperate person that spends all that energy, for 4 hours, and they're like, okay, whatever. You they're not thinking that you're the person to be with. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so I think that walking away and setting that up where we're going to build
Hmm.
relationship. So
Hmm.
you have to earn the right to ask those questions. If
Mm.
I've built a client for a long period of time, I can just ask the questions and go through it because I've already earned the right.
Mhm.
But in the beginning of a relationship, even that data entry is
Mm.
an opportunity to build relationship.
Right, right. You
So
mentioned you mentioned breaking bread, and I agree. Breaking bread is probably one of the most valuable things you can do with with actually anybody, right? To kind of get to know them, and kind of learn more about them. Another scenario someone told me is actually my sales journey. He said, "Give them a ride to the airport. You will get to know them so much better if you gave someone, that person you want to get to know, that ride to the airport.
I agree. Take a
Besi-
walk.
Take a walk. So, kind of along these lines of thinking, what have you seen outside of breaking bread, taking walks, driving them to the airport? If we can get creative here, what other kind of perhaps activities can be used to really compress the time to get trust?
So I think again, that, trust compression is the idea of splitting up meetings and breaking,
Hmm.
building a relationship, sort of a separate thing. It's
Mhm.
part of it.
Mhm.
And in ideas, it's interesting. One of the things that we do is when you have an agenda, that's
Mhm.
where that relationship breaks down. If you less have
Mhm.
an agenda and you're just spending time together. So, for
Mhm.
example, a lot of meals that we do with clients, we don't, or we'll do group dinners with no
Mhm.
agenda,
Mhm.
like no
Mhm.
presentation. That's a really hard for people because they want to get their stuff across.
Yeah.
It's more important that they become receptive to your message and trust you. The old expression, they people care more about how much you care than how much you know.
Mm.
So a lot of times people want to push how much they know, and I think that's a mistake. It's way better to spend that time building some sort of a relationship, a
Yeah.
footing to build everything
Mhm.
on. And I don't know, off the top of my head, I mean, a walk or sometimes you call a client and just say,
Mhm.
"Hey, it's your birthday or it's your kid's birthday." The more
Mhm.
information you know about them, that's
Mhm.
helpful. Throw
Mhm.
that piece back out. How's
Mhm.
you know Buffy the dog, right? They'll go, "Oh,
Mhm. Mhm.
thanks for asking. That's really sweet." So you're making sure they know that you know them. And we
There
write
is
all those notes down. Like what kind of
right.
chocolate they like, what kind of drinks they like, what kind of, anything that
Yeah.
we can pick up, we have like a list of things that we know about them.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if you're a fan of The Office, but
Yeah.
there's a particular scene where they're selling paper to a pretty medium sized business, and the salesman had the note card, right? And then
Mhm.
how's your son? Do you still have the yacht? Do you still go hunting? And it was kind of these salespeople are kind of hardened and battle tested, so they kind of know what it takes. But for service, a lot of service professionals, they're kind of used to just people coming to them because they're the licensed expert, and they never had to go hustle and build relationships and build that relationship fast.
I think I agree with you. I think
Huh.
everything is sales, and so many
Mhm.
of professionals assume that their product is not to be sold.
Mhm.
Accountants, particularly, are like they bristle, but attorneys as well, right? I think
Mhm.
like I'm a professional and you're supposed to listen to me. But at the end of the day, there's one of my good friends, he's a doctor, and
Mhm.
I said, "How's it going?" Right in the beginning, and after he gotten into practice, and he goes, "I never realized I was going to have to sell my services." So all professionals do it.
Mhm.
And part of sales is building a relationship.
Right, right. And I would argue everyone is
Everyone's
in
in
the
the sales
business
business.
sales, right? And if you can close a 4-year-old on eating their vegetables at dinner time or get them to go to sleep, you you're halfway to be a seasoned sales professional.
Yeah, I think that in the end of analysis, sales is nothing more than influence. I
Exactly.
also think, by the way, that sales is so like the negative side of sales is seen, like, I don't know, the used cars feel, right?
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
the guys who are really, the people who are really good at
Hmm.
it, it's a conversation and you just feel like
Hmm.
they care about you and they're
Hmm.
listening to you and everything's great. That they're getting all sorts of information about what you need and what you want.
Yeah, I've heard this saying, um, no one likes to be sold, but they like to buy. And
Everyone likes to buy.
I just kind of thought about it, I was like, oh man, that is so on point.
Well, and I think the other thing in sales is it just is a little bit of a departure. But the other thing about sales is that that most people's experience are the low end salespeople, the least
Mhm,
trained, least capable. But you'd rarely have an opportunity, for example, to talk to a person who sold Lear jets. I'm
mhm,
sure a Lear jet salesman is really, really, really good at their job,
mhm,
and
mhm.
you'd be like, "Whoa, this is completely different." So, they're taking their experience from the shoe salesman, not from the Lear jet salesman or whatever.
Right, right, and most people, if it was is a very exceptional salesperson, like the Learjet, you wouldn't even notice that, you were sold on it. You just kind of bought it, and
Well, because they're
because
helping you to get what you want, right? At the end of the
exit,
day, they're
yeah.
just conduits to helping you understand what you want and get
Mhm,
what you want.
yeah. So let me kind of go down an alley here. And obviously, building trust really fast is really important for service professionals. Obviously, it kind of is around referral marketing. And one of the things that I've seen is, as compared to say digital marketing or direct response to the mail, that is easily measurable, right? Like we can send out 1,000 flyers or spend $10 on a cost per click, and we got 1,000 clicks, and this is how many people click, and eventually this is how many leads we got, and this is how many clients we got. How do we measure something based on referral relationships, time spent, things like that?
So it's funny. I was just talking with an attorney who had no idea what his numbers were. I said, "Well, what's your cost per referral, or what's your conversion rate?" Well, I have no idea because I. Well, then how do you run the business if you have no just control of any of those? I think it's super important to know. Um, at the very least, to your point, I got 10 referrals. I turned it into 6 clients or 2 clients. That's your conversion rate.
Mhm.
You need to know
Mhm.
that. Um, your cost per referral. Well, I know how much I did to give that guy, the guy who gave me the referral. I know what I put into that, right, that
Mhm.
relationship. I
Mhm.
I gave him basketball tickets. Went out and spent time. I mean, that's something that you could quantify if you wanted
Mhm.
to.
Mhm.
I get that general marketing is not quantifiable. So, you were sending just image or the stuff you put on Facebook.
Mhm.
You might not be generating lead flow out of there. You're really trying to develop a reputation,
Mm.
and that's sort of base marketing. But yeah, you should be able to know those numbers because you can't run the business if you don't know those numbers. And part of you brought up referrals. I think this concept that's in the book about edification is also super important. It's
Mm.
if a referral says, "I have this guy, Dan, he's an attorney." Well, I've just commoditized you by the way I introduced you, right?
Mm.
Because now you're all attorneys, right? So do I have a better attorney over here or a better
Yeah.
one over there? Who knows, right? I
Mhm.
didn't say I have this guy Dan and he's an amazing person. First, I have to start with his a family. He is an amazing family person. I mean, he
Mhm.
just really whatever. I could tell a story. Dan and I went fishing and he fell over the fishing box and right. The point is now you're something different.
Mhm.
And so how you introduce somebody, this idea of edification, how I edify you is going to determine how much they trust you. I can transfer my trust that I
Mhm.
built. If I do it poorly, I can also de-edify you, which would
Mhm.
be,
Mhm.
Dan's a great guy, but if he doesn't return your phone call right away, don't be surprised because he's really busy. Well, I just cut your legs out from under you with a backhanded compliment. So all of these things are important, all of which are in the
Mhm.
book.
Mhm. Do you talk about in the book? Do you kind of expand on training, right? Training that particular person to edify
Yes,
you. Yes. Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
So we edify. Edification
Uh,
works not just between professionals. Like, for example, an accountant is going to
uh,
recommend an attorney,
mhm.
but um, but it also works between you and your staff.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
a lot of times, particularly attorneys or accountants, for that matter, are the center of their universe.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
they want to be the big cheese, and everybody else is sort of serves them. The problem with that is that if you're the big cheese, why should I trust the little cheese? Right?
Mhm.
You need to
Mhm.
build your staff people up to be better than you,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So to
Yeah.
my point, I bet you 95% of my client interactions are not with me. Think
Mm.
about that because I can scale. If 95% of my interactions are with me, I can't scale because I've made everything about me. So what you do is you say, "Hey, I'm going to introduce you to Shannon and, again, let me tell you a little story. You can give her $1 million, put it in your backyard. 5 years from now come back, it would still be there cuz she's like that." Okay? Salt of the earth. Well, now they've just taken an instant liking to her, trusts her. And if she's got anything, she's definitely going to bring me back in if she needs help.
Mhm. Mhm.
They're great. And that's how you can get 95% of your interactions to
Mhm.
not be with you, which allows you to scale.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you? Um, Obviously, you're edifying your team. Can you expand on that one? How do you kind of train on this, right? Because like obviously if the boss has a particular mindset or attitude about great customer service, being responsive, um, how do you kind of transform your team? Say, hey, this is the tack we're taking. I need you all to be better than me, so they want to talk to you instead of me.
So I think if you keep a secret, then if it's all in your head, there's no way that it's going to get transferred, right? So for us, we do regular meetings and all of this stuff is
Mm,
discussed. It
mm,
is very intentional. If it looks, I always think sales looks like um, it's an accident. It just looks like they're just
mm,
really nice people. But
mm,
but really behind the scenes, it's very intentional. We built everything. We've discussed it. It gets discussed all the time.
mhm,
And they do it between each other. So we encourage it, and people, the leader leads by example. So if
mm,
I do it, and then if they're not doing it, and then I'll catch them and say, hey, shouldn't you be doing this with each other? Oh yeah, but
mm,
you're setting the tempo, you're setting the example all the time, and it does work its way. It takes time,
mhm.
and and you'll be like, well, you just talked to so and so, and you had this other staff person on the phone, and you didn't even introduce them, and they're like, oh yeah, I didn't even think about that. All right, well, so next time, and it eventually will kick, but it takes a little while to build that. That becomes part of company culture, the expectations that people have of each other within a
Mm,
company, right? The
yeah,
employees have of each other. So it's the feel of the company.
yeah. We've already talked about trust compression and edification. Are those kind of intertwined, right? Because there's some, trust, trust
Yeah, I mean,
and
building
right.
trust.
Yes.
I think trust compression is really more about the concept of compressing the amount of time and the way that the appointments occur.
Mm,
Edification is in setting somebody up with momentum and a chance for success.
mm,
So
mm,
I want to be very mindful that I don't cut their legs out
mhm,
from under them.
mhm,
When I'm introducing another professional, for example, if you were going to
mhm.
say, hey, I've got an insurance guy I want you to go talk to, you know, hopefully he doesn't sell you something. That would be a way of cutting his legs out. So I think that being very mindful of how you introduce somebody
Mhm.
is not, it helps them, but it's not part of trust compression. They are kind of separate concepts.
Got it. Got it. Obviously, you work with a lot of professional service firms. What are some of the most common challenges you're seeing in those firms that are really holding them back?
So the biggest thing that I find, particularly, there's a lot of smaller firms. The really big firms, they have their act together, but the
Mm,
smaller firms, two, three, four professionals, their biggest problem is they run the firm like a fiefdom and not like a
mm,
company. They don't,
mm,
let's be super mindful of culture and our process. What's our value proposition? They're like,
mm,
oh, I'm an accountant and I do taxes. Well, great. You just commoditized yourself, right? Why
mhm,
don't you tell a story that is unique about your value proposition? And again, being super mindful, they'll have people, well, of what they're trying to create. It's sort of like raising kids. You build specifically the kind of kids you want to exist in the world 10 or 20 years from now.
mhm,
And you do that with your company. But if you
mm,
don't, then all sorts of things start happening goofy. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that I see in that environment. The other thing is they don't work in teams.
mm,
So the accountant works separate from the attorney, whereas they should
mhm,
be building teams, which is one of our company's national referral network, is all about having them play in a sandbox together without eating each other. Because
mm,
that's what typically happens, right? The accountant undercuts the attorney and the financial advisor, because at the end of the day, what they want to be in charge. And building a digital team of like a family office environment
mhm,
is way more powerful. And they just
mhm.
have to eventually see that. So, yeah, nrnamerica.com, that's that company.
All right, yeah, for sure. We'll put that link in the show notes. Before we kind of get into the rapid fire lightning round questions for you as a business owner and entrepreneur, what are some parting thoughts you can share with the professionals that are listening to this show right now?
Yeah. Again, I've said it
Uh,
probably 100 times today, but be very intentional about
mm,
how you build your business. It's what you care about, what brings you energy, or if it
mm,
doesn't bring you energy, if you're just, there's a point where you should maybe be working for somebody else, because
mhm,
have somebody else who's actually going to run it with intention.
Mhm.
But I think that if you're going to run a business, you owe it to the business to run it with all your heart and soul. And the only way that happens is if you have passion about what you're doing, and that should lead to intentionality about what and who you want to build.
All right, we're here with Rick Watson, author of A Firm Worth Building. Hey, if our listeners want to get in touch with you or even buy the book, what's the best way to do so?
So, simplest way, Amazon to buy the book.
Mm.
NR, I'm sorry, wrong address. So it's A Firm Worth Building on Amazon. The other way to do it is go to nrnamerica.com. And the book is going to pop right up there. That's a really cool site where if you're a professional and you want to connect with other professionals. And then lastly, you can just find me on protectionpointadvisors.com.
Mhm.
I'm there. You can easily send me an email if you have questions and you just want to ask a quick question about entrepreneurship. I'm happy to help you there too.
All right, thank you so much. We'll put those links in the show notes. Are you ready for the questions?
I guess so. Let's go.
All right, who do you look up to?
Elon Musk a lot,
Mhm,
actually.
mhm,
He's
mhm.
the he's the perfect example of an entrepreneur, I think.
Yeah, yeah. All right.
Fearless.
What is your favorite business book?
Um, Other than A Firm Worth Building.
Of course.
No, just kidding. I have to say two that I can come to mind. One is Stephen Covey's Seven Habits.
Mhm.
And then the other one is E Myth Revisited, which is the stupidest name in the world for a book, but it is an amazing book talks about a pie business and how to make that business run better. But you realize he's teaching you all sorts of other business.
Yeah, right, right. Um, if you could do one thing over again, what would it be?
Start the registered investment advisor firm earlier. I went through a number of places before I got there, and I wish I'd started that earlier.
Got it. Are you familiar with the term 3 feet from gold?
I'm not familiar with that term.
Okay, so it's kind of a parable for entrepreneurs. So the story goes, a mining prospector buys land because he hears there's gold in Roseville, California, and so he buys all the equipment, buys the land, digs for many years, doesn't find anything. So finally, he gives up, sells all his land, his mining equipment to the next guy, and that guy only digs 3 feet before he hits a large vein of gold. So, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, how do you know when to pivot in your business, and how do you know when you might be just 3 feet from gold?
Oh, interesting. I don't know that you do know. I mean,
Mm,
in my experience, um, I think that the people who have grit tend to perform better, and that
mm,
means that most of the time they're exceeding the place that reasonable people would have stopped.
mm.
So so I called it belligerence, but I had a writing coach who said no, belligerence is a bad word. But I, but I believe that there are folks who, if you were smart, you would have stopped. I think entrepreneurs,
Mm,
as a general rule, have grit and they just keep going, and many times beyond the point when it made sense. So, and it's only after the fact that it makes sense. I will say, I try to move an inch forward, at least an inch every day.
mm, mm. You lose everything in your business. The only thing you have is your laptop, your cell phone, and an internet connection. How do you rebuild your business in 30 days?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. That's a tough one. My initial thought is I'm looking to buy. I've got my reputation. I'm thinking I would buy somebody else's business who wasn't running it very efficiently. Oh yeah, that's probably what I would do. I would go and find another big business and say, "Let me show you how to do this." And oh, by the way, I'll take a third or 50% of the net receipts over us, over where you're at today. So they get 50% and I get 50%, but I just basically took over their existing business. So yeah, I mean, that's another way that I would think off the top of my head.
Got it. Um, what's the best thing you spent $100 or less on that has greatly improved your business life or your personal life?
Oh, a really good camera. So I think the world today is digital, right?
Mhm.
So a really good camera and a really good microphone, I think, you can get both those for under $100,
Mhm.
and but I see some really awful ones. So
All right. Um, are you familiar with the term pioneers get arrows in their backs?
yes, absolutely.
Okay. So how do you know as an entrepreneur whether to go into an industry, or you're disrupting it, or you're being the pioneer, or how do you know when to sit back because you have this awesome idea, but all you heard was pioneers get arrows in their backs?
So my thing about entrepreneurs
Huh.
is they better be fearless. And
Mm,
and I think that you just don't fear the price tag. And the price tag
mm,
may be that you get arrows in your back.
mm,
But I think you just move forward and pay the price. So many people in life in general are afraid of paying the price. They're trying to. So in the book, we talk about this thing about minimum effort people and maximum effort people.
mhm,
And minimum effort people makes a ton of sense. Be defensive. Be put as little energy as possible. I think no. Well, for me, I'm a maximum effort person. I always put 110%. And if it means that I waste energy, I'm okay with that.
mm.
So I would say just go the extra mile all the time.
All right. And finally, what's the biggest challenge in your business today?
Um, I think the biggest challenge is getting other professionals to think bigger.
Mm,
We work with a lot of accountants and attorneys,
mm,
and I just talked to an attorney today, and he's like, "Well, I have enough business, and that's probably enough." I'm like, "Well, so you don't want to grow, but you're spending all this money on marketing." I know. I don't know. We just really don't. I'm like, all right, make a decision. Be
mhm,
one thing or the other. Say
mm,
I'm not going to grow, and I respect that, or I
mm,
want to grow and freaking grow. Do it.
mhm.
But I think that's the one frustration that I constantly have is people just getting folks to have a big enough imagination.
All right. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, Rick, the author of A Firm Worth Building. Hope we can talk again soon.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Dan, for
All
having me
right.
here.
All right.